Welcome to the Humanities Team podcast with me, Steve Farrell. Humanities Team is an international spiritual movement whose purpose is to communicate and demonstrate the timeless truth that we are all one, with the divine and all life, caring for each other and the world we share, so that people's actions reflect this profound understanding within our generation. We believe that living this truth is essential to resolving the most chronic and acute world challenges and vital to creating a flourishing world of peace, harmony, and happiness. We offer transformative education programs in personal and spiritual development, and we host an annual event called Global Oneness Day. Similar to Earth Day, which galvanized the global environmental movement, Global Oneness Day has become a catalyst for spiritual activism and an integral part of the present-day global oneness movement, which represents a profound new paradigm in human culture. Humanities Team is the only global nonprofit organization working in transformational education. Since we are a nonprofit, there is no focus on growing profits or satisfying shareholders, and 100% of all revenue goes toward our work supporting conscious evolution, planetary awakening, and flourishing at every level of life. If you'd like to learn more about us or want to support our mission directly through donation or volunteering some of your time, please visit us online at humanitiesteam.org. And lastly, if you enjoyed this podcast, we'd be grateful if you'd leave us a review. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Executive Director for Humanities Team. Welcome to this Love is the Answer program with Marianne Williamson, and thank you for joining us for this Global Oneness Summit 2020 program. I'm going to formally introduce Marianne in a moment, but let me share a little to get us started. Some say Marianne is a spiritual author and leader who wants to harness love for political and social purposes. I would go further and say she'd like to create a global society based on love in this generation. She recently suspended her U.S. presidential campaign for Democratic nominee. Among other things, Marianne was unique among Democratic candidates for establishing a Department of Peace, which would oversee efforts ranging from combating white supremacy to finding non-military solutions to foreign conflicts. She is also a vocal supporter of reparations for American descendants of enslaved Africans. Her proposed Department of Peace would work to combat hate, including white supremacy and misogyny. She also wants the government to profoundly change its priorities, devoting less money to the military and more to peace building and social programs. But in another sense, she is talking about something much more amorphous. In her book, Tears to Triumph, she suggests that people join love's revolution, taking even the tiniest steps to contribute energy to the transformational wave of consciousness now rising up among us. Okay, so as we get started, I'm going to now give Marianne a formal introduction. Marianne Williamson is a best-selling author, political activist, and spiritual thought leader. For over 3 decades, Marianne has been a leader in spiritual and religiously progressive circles. She is the author of 14 books, 4 of which have been #1 New York Times bestsellers. This quote from her mega bestseller, A Return to Love, is considered an anthem for a contemporary generation of seekers. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. During Marianne's historic campaign for Democratic presidential nominee, she elevated the conscious conversation to the main stage for the whole country and for the world to hear. And welcome to the Global Oneness Summit, Marianne. It's great to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you for that very generous introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, we're delighted to have you with us here for the Global Oneness Summit. Thank you so much for joining us. And so we're going to just jump right in here, Marianne. Now, coming off of your presidential campaign, can you share thoughts about America's desire and capacity to embrace love as a way of living our daily lives?
I think both in this country and throughout the world, there are far more people who love than who hate. People are decent. People in the United States are decent. We're no more decent than people anywhere else, but we're good. The vast majority of people on this planet just want to live their lives, raise their kids, make the world better for their kids than it was for them. The problem is not that those who have hate in their hearts, those who are ruled by fear, racism, anti-Semitism, bigotry, homophobia, etc. The problem is not that there are more people whose psychological and emotional grounding is based on fear predominate in terms of numbers. The problem is that now, as is often true and has been true throughout history, those who are grounded in hate or those who are grounded in fear collectivize their hatred, collectivize and politicize their hatred. And that's extremely dangerous. On the other hand, love tends to be, particularly in a society like ours, more of a personal pursuit. We love our own kids. We love our partners, our spouses. We love our homes. And all that is right and good. Except in the world we live in today, the historic phase transition that we're living through challenges us and demands that we move in every way from a consciousness of me to a consciousness of we. We must not only love. The love that will save the world can't just be for my children. It has to be for every mother's child. The love for our home can't just be for our own individual homes. It has to include a realization that the entire earth is the home to humanity. And so the love that will save the world now is a love that involves our love, not just my love. And I believe that Americans are ready for that. I believe that people around the world are ready for that. I believe that the work that you do, that your organization does, that so many of us have been doing for decades, has had a profound effect on the culture. We have already mainstreamed the conversation about the psychological and emotional benefits. I think organizations like yours, I think the work of so many of us over the last few decades has prepared the ground, has helped fertilize the field to the point where the idea of a greater love, a greater compassion, having genuine psychological, emotional, and even physical benefits has become a mainstream conversation. Now we need to take it to the next step. And I do believe people are ready. And that is that we recognize that love not only has relevance and profound relevance in our personal lives, it also has profound relevance in our collective lives. And that's what politics is. It's our collective behavior. Now, where I think we have gotten stuck and need to catch up with ourselves is that over the last couple of decades, particularly, people in the higher consciousness and spiritual communities have had almost a chronic disengagement from political issues, almost as though politics was too toxic to go there. But we know that we're not on this earth to heal a healthy place. We're on this earth to heal the wound. And politics is one of our more wounded places. So if politics was toxic, and all the people who might have the clue as to how to transform it, because they know how to transform a heart, and if you know how to transform one heart, you're the one who knows how to change the world. If people who have those kinds of understandings avoid politics because they say politics is too toxic, then all that happens is the politics becomes more toxic. And then more people with a higher consciousness tend to avoid it. So now I believe what's important is that people such as yourself, such as summits like this, the impulse of this moment is for us to recognize that it's not a new conversation so much as an expanded conversation. There's a part in A Course in Miracles where it talks about the universal applicability of spiritual principles. They apply to personal relationships. They also apply to collective relationships. When you have a couple who is fighting, the same principles that apply there apply to the relationship between the Israelis and the Palestinians. When you're talking about our need to act with reverence, that applies to the earth as much as to anything else. So I believe that right now we have to, and I think that's what we're doing on days like today, we just simply need to sound the note like a tuning fork. And I believe more people are ready to rise into the space of that conversation than you might think, because, like I said, we've been preparing the field for a very long time.
Yes, we have. And so this actually takes us right into our next question. So now during the COVID-19 pandemic and these atrocities involving people of color. Are you hopeful that people are examining their deeper values and priorities? And do you believe that a door has maybe opened to an awakening during this tumultuous time?
I do believe that there has been a political awakening. I think that that's undeniable. Whether that political awakening is coupled with the necessary spiritual awakening remains to be seen and will make all the difference. When you ask me if I'm hopeful because hope is a moral imperative. Cynicism is just an excuse for not helping. Hopelessness is an easy way out. On the other hand, it's not only what we do, it's the consciousness with which we do something that ultimately makes all the difference. If the political awakening that is happening in our country today moves in the direction where it is mainly contained within the emotional and psychological space of anger, then we're in terrible trouble. But if that anger is actually a moral outrage born of love, and enough people understand the necessity, as Gandhi would say, for spiritual self-purification to precede our political activism, knowing that the container for our political awakening, the spiritual container for our political awakening, that it be based on nonviolence is as important as any other aspect of the awakening, then yes, we are on the brink of the most extraordinary chapter of American history, more enlightened, more aligned with the aspirational principles on which we were founded than ever before. In the long term, I have more than hope that will occur. In the long term, I have absolute faith that it will occur for a variety of reasons. First of all, because, as it has been said so many times before, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But also because I believe in the American people, and I believe in the profundity of the principles on which we are founded. On the other hand, when it comes to short term and middle term, I think these are very rough waters, and we need to build our ship much stronger because these are serious times.
Yes, they are. Yeah. And so here with COVID and with the George Floyd,
and now with what's happening, as you and I are speaking, with what's happening with federal troops, the presence of federal agents in Portland and possibly in the next few days in other cities as well. That is up there in seriousness with COVID and with the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protests.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And my hope is, as you mentioned, this is about going beyond the eros kind of love, and family love, to consciousness love, and that there's some heart opening going on, because I certainly feel it myself as I watch these protesters being dragged off, and the George Floyd and other similar kinds of experiences in COVID, where you've got emergency workers and that are in harm's way, and so many. Yeah.
And the fury that people feel, the understandable fury that people feel, that in the richest country in the world, our doctors and our nurses are sacrificing, are giving of themselves on the level that they're giving, at risk the way they are, and that we have not as a country even provided them with the necessary equipment or protective gear. It is obscene. It is so immoral. If you do not have the spiritual grounding with which to navigate this, I understand it would be very difficult, very, very difficult. It's difficult for those of us who do have a spiritual understanding. Without a spiritual understanding, I don't know how people are even enduring this moment. I heard someone say something very interesting recently, the way they put it. They said that the spiritual path is a path of both awareness and compassion. If you have compassion that is only a compassion based on looking at the good things, the happy things, the people that are acting the way you want them to act, then that's a kind of cheap and easy compassion. That's a ultimately weak love. You have to have awareness of what's really going on. On the other hand, if you have awareness without compassion, life is too difficult to bear. It's much like when we embark upon a personal journey of growth and transformation. We're not going to journey into the fields of enlightenment without really looking deeply at ourselves. And if we look really deeply at ourselves, if we have a commitment to brutal honesty and self-awareness, it's going to be painful at times. We're going to be embarrassed by some of what we see, humiliated by some of what we see. We're going to have regret. We're going to have remorse. We're going to have places where we feel that we failed. It's difficult. We have to have compassion for ourselves in order to undertake that kind of serious personal journey. And the same is true now. If, for instance, with the United States of America, you know, some people in the United States only want to talk about what America has done right, ways that we're exceptional, and they don't have any listening for the terrible dark underbellies, for the realities of race, the realities of militarism, the realities of economic injustice and corporatism. And so it's a false positivism. But there are other people who seem only to want to look at what America has done wrong. They have no serious historical recognition of all the people, the generations, the sacrifices by which things that were wrong were made right. They have no acknowledgement of the places where America's done really great things. I think that we need to hold our country with great compassion. I think we need to hold our country with great love. I think we need to hold each other with great compassion and with great love, and do the serious inquiry into what has been made wrong that must be made right, and the recognition that we're the generation that must do the repair.
Yes, so true. So true. Something occurred to me, Marianne, actually just last couple of days. I was watching this movie Midway with my son, and of course it's a World War II, naval battle and things. And it occurred to me that part of the challenge here is that we're going in a 75-year span from World War II, with all of what that was that might have encouraged this whole alpha male thing, to now we're after divine feminine and male. Just a complete U-turn in terms of what we're being called to defend ourselves in World War II, and now to come into this stage of we consciousness love.
I don't see it quite that way. There is a divine masculine as well as a divine feminine. And the fact that the United States and our allies showed up to defeat Hitler, excuse me, that was definitely funny stuff, to defeat Hitler was not just alpha male. That was divine masculine. That was some of masculine at its best. It's simply a time for a chapter in which the rebalancing of the masculine and feminine is necessary at this point. You can look at World War II as I see the Japanese Imperial Army and the Nazis during World War II, much like an operable tumor. It could be surgically removed, and there was a generation that did the surgery brilliantly. It was an allopathic approach, but it was an allopathic approach that was necessary, that took tremendous bravery, courage, and did a lot of sacrifice, and I believe deserves a lot of acknowledgement. It's just that now the problem is more like a cancer that has already metastasized, and much of it is wrapped around some healthy organs. And so now we need to take a far more integrative approach, which includes psychological and spiritual dynamics, which includes the feminine as well as the masculine. It's not either or when it comes to divine feminine or divine masculine. Both are necessary.
Yeah, so true. And of course, it's not just a male-female thing. It's
not at all.
It's all of us coming into that balance.
And any languaging that contributes to that, I think, holds us back.
Yeah, so true. So let's go to our Global Oneness Day theme this year, which, as you know, is the power of love, resetting humanity to a new way of living on the earth. And by the way, let me just actually, before I pose the question, you were part of the reason that we settled on that theme. Your historic presidential campaign really brought that into focus. I want to, from all of us in Humanities team and viewers, thank you for that. So what are the things that we can do to lift and support this message so that we create real change in this country and around the world?
Well, first of all, those of us who are involved in spirituality know that the first place we must change is within our thinking. The Course in Miracles says your greatest power to change the world lies in your power to change your mind about the world. Martin Luther King Jr. said, no one should mistake our material passivity. We are spiritually active. So the first thing has to do with how we conceive of the world. I heard the Dalai Lama say that a British physicist had said to him that we should think of every other nation as our domestic partner. Now, to me, that's one of those shifts in perception that's wildly profound. So we're used to seeing foreign nations, right? My father, when I was a child, he used to open up the atlas, and he would show us the picture in the atlases where there were not national boundaries. And he would say, see, kids, God didn't draw a line between France and Spain. God didn't draw a line between the United States and Mexico. You have to see the world as a whole. And so when you see every other nation as your domestic partner, you begin to recognize the interdependence that is absolutely essential, the understanding of our interdependence that is absolutely necessary if we're to survive the next 100 years. When we were children, we learned about how evolution works, and we were taught that if a species is displaying behavior that is maladaptive for its survival, that it will either mutate, it will either evolve, or it will go extinct. And it's only magical thinking that makes us believe this could never apply to us. Right now, humanity displays collective behavior that is maladaptive for our survival. All of the great religious avatars, enlightened beings, have been the mutations. They have shown us another way. That's why they're called the way shower. And what they show is a way to what would be analogous in our time to shifting the bottom line of our economic, social, and political functioning from an economic bottom line to a humanitarian bottom line, to put brotherly love, basically, humanity, a recognition of our common humanity, of our oneness, to make that the filter, collaboration rather than competition and attack and defense. Make that the new filter through which we view our activity on Earth. The 21st century demands a different mindset, just as the 20th century was a different mindset than the 19th. Now, many people would say that that's very naive. I believe what's naive is to believe we will even survive on this planet for another 100 years if we don't at least try. You
Yes.
look at environmental laws, different regulations differently. You look at economics differently. You change from the notion of public policy, which once again is nothing other than our collective behavior, the spending of our collective money. That's all that it is. Changing it from a guiding principle of short-term profit for huge corporate interests to the question, what would help people thrive? And that's why, whether it has to do with healthcare, whether it has to do with economic justice, whether it has to do with education, you recognize that which helps people thrive, which helps people soar, which displays a love for a child and love for each other, is what will ultimately create both economic abundance and peace in our societies, peace on our streets, and peace on earth.
Yeah, amen to that. And if ever there were a moment where we could really step into it, understand that and embody that, express that, even in business.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Even in business. You know, when I was a child, and I'm not trying to glamorize American capitalism and pretend that it was ever perfect, but when I was a child, there was a social consensus that corporations should try to do the right thing. If someone had worked for a corporation for decades, it was understood that the corporation should have an interest in that person having a dignified retirement. Starting in the 1980s with trickle-down economic theory, the idea was that the only responsibility the corporation was not moral, but only fiduciary responsibility to its stockholders. And that would often be at the expense of unions, at the expense of pensions, at the expense of safety regulations, at the expense of the health and well-being of the worker. In other words, American capitalism was allowed to completely disconnect itself from moral and ethical sense of responsibility to the planet and to the inhabitants of this planet. It has had a devastating effect on our economy. It has had a devastating effect on our politics because of the undue influence that those corporations have on our politics, and it has had a devastating effect on the lives of millions of people.
Yeah, we're going to come back and do a separate program with you just on conscious business because, of course, we couldn't agree more. And there's a lot we're doing. We've created with these with 3 other NGOs, the Club of Budapest, the Goy Peace Foundation, and the Fowler Center for Business as an agent of public benefit, a conscious business declaration. But let me come back to that in another program. But I'll just say now we certainly completely agree with you. So what call to action, Marianne, would you like to leave with the Global Oneness Summit viewers this year?
One of the things that I've heard people say recently that I think is so true. Let's all try to be a little kinder right now. There's so much hate. And I think all of us are called upon to recognize how much our own lives are microcosms. Where are we not forgiving? Where are we not kind? Where do we have harsh angles in our personalities that still need to be smoothed out? Now, I'm not saying that's enough, because that must be followed up with whatever actions are then revealed to us. And sometimes that action has to do with calling your mother who you haven't talked to in years. Sometimes it has to do with being more participatory in your community. There's a being and a doing. So I believe the first call to action is the activity in our minds. And then from that, the activity that is called forth is whatever we feel moved to do. I think that our activities in life, just like our relationships, are assignments determined by our own spiritual internal teacher. Every relationship is an assignment. If you're a scientist, science is your assignment. If you're a teacher, teaching is your assignment. If you're an artist, art is your assignment. But I believe politics is our collective assignment. And that's where I feel this takes us back to this idea. There is no serious religious or spiritual tradition anywhere that gives any of us a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. Any talk about spirituality that doesn't include how might I serve, how might I help assuage the suffering of others is a false spirituality. It might have a lot of value in your life, but let's not call it spiritual. And at this point, there is an addressing of suffering that can only be made fundamentally through collective change of mind and collective perspective. Whatever that means in any individual's life, to me, that's what we're called to now.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, amen to that. And as you know, this is what we stand for in Humanities Team for 17 years. Yeah, is that we're growing. Barbara Marx Hubbard used to call this journey from Homo sapien to Homo universalis, and some call it Homo luminous and different things. But it's that journey into really our spiritual self, our higher self, and an elevated humanity. And thank you for all of the work that you've done. And
back at you. Thank you. And thank Barbara, and thank everybody who's been part of this larger revolution in consciousness. The Course in Miracles says an idea grows stronger when it's shared. And you can feel what happens when an idea whose time has come. You can feel what happens when a conversation reaches critical mass. And that's what's happening today and not a moment too soon.
Yes, that is what is happening today. And you can feel it breaking through.
Yeah.
So, and again, Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for being with us for this program. I want to also, back in September, we gave you our Spiritual Leadership Award. So congratulations again on that. And
thank you so much for your generosity to me.
Yeah. And thank you for being here as we're getting started with the Global Oneness Summit. What a great program to get us started. So thank you so much.
You're doing great work, Steve. Thank you so much. All my love, guys.
If you'd like to receive all of our new podcast episodes, please click on the subscribe button. To find out more about Humanities Team transformational education programs and about how you can help support our mission, please visit us online at humanitiesteam.org, where you can also sign up for our email list so we can let you know about our free online events and other news about what we're up to each week. And again, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review. Thank you.